Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Adoption Happy Hour presented by NAAP, the National Association of Adoptees and Parents. Our mission is to unify the adoption community and amplify diverse voices through dialogue, education, connection, and healing. I'm Jennifer Fahlsing, and I have the privilege of guest hosting this evening on behalf of Marcy Keithley. I am joined tonight by fellow board member Beth Sturry. So thank you, Beth, for being here. And we are delighted to welcome attendees from across the country and around the world. Whether you've been a part of this community for years or joining us for the very first time, we are grateful that you're here. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. Before we begin our conversation with tonight's guest, we just have a few housekeeping notes that we would like to share. Oh, thank you, Beth. Um, So please remain on mute. Raise your hand on the screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You may post your questions or comments in the chat. If it's something you want us to ask privately, just message Beth or myself, and we will, when we get a chance to get to the questions, we will ask that for you. But this is a reminder that this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. We do record a portion of this program, and it will be shared in our private happy hour group, on our NAP Facebook page, and on our YouTube channel. Also, we want to remind you, if you're experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by texting 988.
We also want to take this opportunity to remind you of all of NAAP's programming. I'm going to start in the bottom corner, unlike how I usually do. Next week, make sure she is doing it. Jennifer, for
No,
Thanksgiving,
because
is
it
she
falls on
doing?
Thanksgiving.
Okay. Okay, so there will be no Migrating Toward Wholeness next week, but normally the fourth Thursday of each month, Dr. Liz facilitates this program. Happy hour is normally the first and the third Friday of each month, but again, we're going to be a little bit light in December. There will not be one the first Friday night, but there will be a very special holiday program on the third Friday night of the month featuring, we can say who, right?
Go ahead.
I believe so. Dr. Joyce and Ann Heffron will be teaming up to bring us a special holiday happy hour, so you won't want to miss that. And because of that, Dr. Joyce will not be doing her reunion support group that she normally does on a Tuesday. Normally it's the second or the third Tuesday of the month. If you've not been to one of those, you are missing out, because that group really talks all things reunion, and Dr. Joyce is so well versed in all of that and really supportive. So that brings us to First Families, facilitated by Amy Seek, and that is the second Thursday of the month, and I believe they will be on target for December. So you
December
can see
11th.
that.
Yes.
Okay, you can see that NAP has all sorts of programs going on all month that you can get your time with the adoption community, and so we hope you will participate in those.
Absolutely. Thank you, Beth. So yeah, we are back in January with our regular programs returning. Plus, we can't quite reveal it all yet, but we can give you a little hint that we are going to be doing a special NAP Presents. So it's on a weekend, and it's a longer program. And we're going to be showing a new film that nobody else has seen before. So the details will be coming out soon, but we will be streaming a new film. And then also I want to let you know, let's see, I gotta get, where did my share go? Lost my share button. There we go. I wanted to share with you, um, Untangling Our Roots is, early bird registration is open. So the website is untanglingourroots.org. If you see right in the middle of the screen, there's 100 early bird tickets. You can click that and you can get a ticket today at the early bird pricing. Like I said, they are limited. The summit will be held March 19th through the 22nd in Atlanta. Also, if you do get that early bird ticket, do not, um, I'm saying when you do that, get yourself your room so you can come up here and you can see venue and you can click on venue and you can book your room. And just come down here and reserve your room. But notice this, do not add breakfast. It's already included. They charge $30 a day for breakfast. So we have negotiated a special rate and it's built into the price of your room. And if you've been to any of our other previous summits, we have actually negotiated down the hotel room rate. So it's a weird thing in today's world. We got something the price to go down on. So now's the time to book that. And some of you may have been in Atlanta and no, not Atlanta. Where were we? Louisville. And
Ooh.
yeah, Louisville. And met Linda in Louisville, and she will be back in Atlanta. So it's always a great time to come and connect with some very special people. So with that, let me change my view here. Would like to introduce you to tonight's guest. We are very honored to have her back. Linda Pevac was no, was it September 8th of 2023. So we're excited that she's back. She is a domestic adoptee, an author, and advocate whose three memoirs trace a powerful journey through loss, identity, trauma, and healing. Her newest book, Choosing to Breathe. You can see this here. Oh, gotta find the right spot. Choosing to Breathe is a great book, and it is also now available on Audible. So make sure you check that out, and Beth and I will drop the links into everything. Um, but it is a continuation of the story begun in the gathering place, and a fire is coming, capturing the moment in her life, turned from survival to intention, agency, and breath. Emma Stevens is a pen name for Linda, and they said she's the author of these three memoirs. She has a background in journalism and psychology, and her work spotlights the complexity of adoptee identity, trauma, and mental health. She advocates for ethical therapy, adoptee voices, and personal agency as forms of healings. Today, we'll explore what it means to reclaim identity, find breath amid pain, and move from silence to voice. Linda, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me for a second time, NAAP, and everyone that has joined tonight. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So, we're going to do tonight's happy hour interview style. So I'm going to ask her some questions, but make sure you guys, have a pen and paper ready and jot down your own notes because at 8 o'clock, we're going to stop this recording and we're going to turn it over to you guys to ask your questions. But I do have to start with three memoirs. Okay. Are they meant to be a series or do they reflect different stages of adoptee identity?
Um, a series, yes, but I think when I was thinking later after I had talked to you, I think a trilogy is more accurate because they are stepping stones. Each book builds upon the other. And I didn't intend this at all. It was not my plan to write three books. I thought one, and yay, I'm out. I did it. I did my book. But it just happened in a different way of where each one kept unfolding, and they were written about a year and a half apart, each one. And you can almost track my healing from the first book to the second to the third. And yeah, it just wasn't planned that way, but that's how it happened. And I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with it being, and it is done, right? There's only going to be three. There's not going to be number four. There could be a different book, but it won't be part of that trilogy, right? Um, so that's kind of the answer.
Forgot I muted myself. Yeah, the evolution from book one where you're breaking in to where you
Oh,
are,
right.
that is it
Yeah,
is crazy. I don't know how much more you could add to this. So yeah, I could see you writing another book, but it probably would not be in the trilogy.
right.
Um, but I do have a question because I love the title. So, what does the title Choosing to Breathe mean to you? Was it a moment where it became like a choice rather than survival?
It definitely was. It's a mindset to me that choosing to breathe, we all know how to breathe, right? We do it involuntarily, but when we choose to breathe, we're breathing intentionally, and that takes mindfulness to take a deep inhale and a full exhale. And um, it's just a mindset that I wanted to do to a lot of things that led me to get to that point. Um, I made sort of a new philosophy for myself that everything I do, I try to look through the lens of three things. Is it loving? What's my motivation? And is it going to bring me towards health? And if it doesn't meet that criteria, then as much as I may want to be petty or I may want to make a wrong decision or whatever, tell myself, I bring myself back to the point where I've said, I've chosen to intentionally have this mindset. Um, and so it's also about taking a pause because in my past, I was just too reactive and didn't give myself the grace to say, I don't know how I feel about that. Give me a moment and I'll get back to you. So, giving myself that pause has helped me implement that mindfulness and that mindset to just to, to promote lasting change. Because if I'm not intentional about choosing to breathe, and this is just something that if I don't do it, I'm going to go back to my default. I'm going to go back to what I always did in my past, whatever I learned. And I wanted to interrupt that cycle. And I had a catalyst in my life that really brought me to my knees. It was a fork in the road. And I think a lot of people have to have that happen before they'll really shake everything up and change. Um, in other times in my life, I wasn't given the choice to have a pause or be reflective because a lot of us, well, when we were in our childhood homes, we were told who to be, we were told what to do. So we didn't have choice. And I'm recognizing now that I do have choice. And I have a choice to either keep telling myself a false narrative or go back to that default personality that I used to be because I had to. I didn't have choice, but I have choice now, and that's the key that has set me free. So choosing to breathe was so important to me because it wasn't just a book I wrote; it was really me healing in real time, and it continues, and I want it to continue. I'm never gonna. None of us are fully healed ever, but you know what I'm saying is just that is set in place. And if I keep with the mindset, then I'm liable to stay on track a lot better than if I'm left to my own devices.
Yeah, definitely. I believe that we have the power every day when we wake up to determine what that day is going to be. That all starts in our head.
Yeah.
Either you wake up and you're grumpy and your day is going to be horrible, or you wake up and you're like, it could be raining or whatever outside, but you're like, today's going to be a great day, and you make it what you want it to be. So I believe in that setting your intentions. Um,
Hmm.
and you talk about learning to pause. Um, that is hard for a lot of people, especially in the instant gratification, instant response, social media age. How did you kind of learn how to do that pause?
Mm. Well, okay, that a lot of things brought me to that point, but I learned about the pause, I guess, when I was studying the 12 steps. If you've ever been in a 12-step program of any kind, it really kind of shows you to stop and take a look. They call it metacognition of where you think about your thinking. Which is kind of funny. You sit back and think about what am I thinking about right now and how am I thinking? But it does help you see yourself in a different perspective. And so I knew where I was coming from, and I didn't want to do that anymore. So I was willing at that point to do anything to get rid of. Another thing about choosing to breathe is that, and I think a lot of us can relate, is that I've been a chest breather since I was born, since I was relinquished and adopted, been a chest breather. Hypervigilance was in my nervous system. But I do believe we can change those things if we're intentional and mindful about it. So by switching to being not only breathing just enough to get by, now I'm breathing into my life symbolically and physically to nourish my body, nourish my brain, and to make better choices and say, I've seen what bondage does. I don't want that anymore. So that was another thing. And when your hypervigilance is going away, guess what it makes space for? Your creativity, your curiosity, all of those things that are really life-giving. So I want more of that.
Absolutely. So that kind of leads me to think about this. You talk about setting your intentions, learning to pause, shedding this idea of what your identity is. Is that how you came up with Emma? Did Emma allow you that freedom to say things that Linda wouldn't say?
Absolutely. That and the fact that my parents were still alive at that point when I wrote the first two books, The Gathering Place and A Fire's Coming. And I needed to go incognito because I felt like there wasn't enough time in their life at that point to ever do repair if they should find out. And I hear so many adoptees say, I'll write that book after they pass. And for me, it was, I need a voice, I need it now. And I feel like a pseudonym is going to get me there. So it worked. To tell you the truth, it actually worked. But after a while, when I get to after I've launched book number two, started realizing I was giving Emma a lot of credit. Linda wanted to be more like Emma. I'm like, what's going on here? And it's kind of a paradox that my birth mother used a pseudonym on my birth certificate, and then I'm using a pseudonym now in my life to show up places. And I thought, how ironic is that? So I came again to a fork in the road. I thought it is time that I merge. It's time that I tell everyone. I remember talking to Marcy when I first met her, and she said, Linda, I don't know how we can have a happy hour with you not showing your face and us not calling you by your real name. And so she kind of put it on the table for a while, saying, come back to me when, maybe that's been resolved. But when I was first out there in our community, I wouldn't show my face. I made podcast people dub it out if they said Linda instead of Emma. And I was making other people hold my secret. So I came to a point, that fork in the road, where I was like, oh, I see what I'm doing and I've got to get rid of that. Emma is a part of me. Emma's a part of Linda. And so I'm embracing that now instead of thinking, oh, Emma's brave. Oh, Emma's a good writer. It was kind of funny the way it was all unfolding. But I'm integrated now.
And I can totally see how that happens. I mean, what is adoption if it's not secrets and shame? So why wouldn't you carry that with you? So that was a big hurdle for you to be able to integrate Emma and Linda and be able
Yeah.
to come on and do this kind of stuff. So,
Well, it was
and I,
important on the cover of the third book. You'll see that I show my profile. And so
yes,
that's symbolic again that now Linda gets to be on the cover of the books that she wrote.
so that's awesome. Um, and I'm sure a good part of this integration has to do with therapy, the work that you have done. And I just want to ask you a little about this because I know you've experienced adoptee trauma and therapy harm. So, how did those experiences intersect in your life?
Mm, good question. I think I would start by saying after I painstakingly found my birth parents and I was in reunion, I realized it didn't solve my adoption angst. It solved a lot of things. It gave me a lot of um, self-worth and just the ability that I went through kind of some heroic efforts to find them, but it didn't solve, that deep hole and all of that adoption angst and the questions of self-worth. And so I was still carrying all of that with me and recognized that I needed to get some therapy, or I was just going to keep dragging this heavy load on my back throughout my life. So I did reach out to a psychologist, and she was my next door neighbor, and I asked her to help me with this adoption angst and the fact that I'd grown up in an authoritative childhood home. Um, and instead of helping me, she had a private agenda to foster a dependency on her. She wanted me to truly see her as the nurturing mother I never had. And I went for it because, I felt seen for the first time. I felt heard. I felt like this love was just amazing because she made me feel so special. But long story short, she was maneuvering me into her secret agenda where it had nothing to do about healing Linda or helping Linda with adoption angst. So I walked away from that. I crawled away from that relationship with exacerbated issues. And so that's how that intersected because of my deep need for a mother. And I never came to terms with how much I was really searching other people, even though I'd already met my birth mother, but that didn't quite work out. So I continued my search. Now that I see what I did, I was able to stop that pattern. Um, and I've gone on to have really good therapy. So I'm a big proponent for therapy, and it's helped me tremendously. But it was a sticky navigating thing about my adoption, relinquishment, my lack of self-worth, and then an evil psychologist.
Well, it sounds like that the psychologists had their own issues that they needed to work through, and they were using you to solve their problems. So I'm so glad that you found the right people that have helped you, and and that is honestly, that is not an easy thing to do, to find somebody who understands what we have experienced and doesn't, downplay it and actually really listens and offers valuable tools and solutions. So I'm so grateful that you did find that and that didn't just say, oh, that was a horrible experience. I'm turning my back on that. So I
Yeah.
did have a question that popped up in the chat that somebody wanted to know. So before we move on, can you expand a little bit on what you mean by how you integrated yourself?
Oh, for the names, well, I mean, I can speak to it broadly and about the names is that I said that Emma, I had to recognize she is a part of me. And all of my parts, not only Emma, they're all welcome. And so for me to finally integrate and pull together all these parts that make up the totality of who I am, that's what I mean by integration and feeling more whole than I ever have in my life because there were obstacles that prevented me from being whole. There were people in my life that didn't want me to be whole because that made me more of a contender or I'd have too many ideas of my own. It was a very authoritative cult like upbringing, which also led to uh, the therapist having an easy time with me because that was my familiar of that power differential and me bowing to it, saying, I guess this is the way love is, and this is the way people act. And so it was very confusing until I was able to get a hold of integrating myself, recognizing my power and my self worth, regardless of what anybody thinks about me. It really all matters how I think about myself. But that took me a long time to realize that. I
And
hope that
it's
answered the
it's
question.
it's yeah, oh yeah, and it's not an uncommon way to feel and look at your life because a lot of us had the fear that if we weren't perfect, we did something wrong, we could be returned. And so you
Yeah,
do just say, hey, whatever you want, I'm the good adoptee, whatever you want, I will be that. So it's very easy to have something like that happen because you don't want to push back and then somebody, walk away from you or give you that feeling of being returned. Um,
right.
but even after everything you went through, you still believe in counseling. So, what actually helped you heal, and what should adoptees watch out for?
More or less in counseling, what they should watch out
Yeah,
for.
yeah,
Any therapist that doesn't let you have your own epiphanies or they want to be your guru, they need to be your guide. And I know we've got some therapists here in the audience, and um, you never let someone else tell you what your thoughts are. And I didn't know that I had the right to to say no. Oh no, you don't. Um, I think this way, and actually, I employ you. And so, an adoptee that goes in, first of all, I really truly think they should go to like Sharon, an adoptee competent therapist, and and also make sure that their idea of what adoptee competent is what your idea is. And if they say adoption competent, that might even be a whole different scenario. So I think they're adoptees, and that's why I'm also an advocate for therapy harm, and is that I want to give permission to for other people to come forth and say, "Oh wow, that happened to me too," but I didn't want to say anything because it's a lot like an essay event where it's so shameful that it's so hard for people to come forth and say that that happened to them too. But the more that we speak out, and the idea is that, and I know that no one likes to have the bad apples in their profession, and they hide in every profession, right? You have to be so careful to make sure you don't give your blind trust to just anyone. They have to earn it. So you have to protect yourself, and I hope adoptees will, do a little education and a little awareness to make sure that they walk in knowing that they have all the rights in the world. And if someone's defensive and doesn't want to answer your questions, then that's a red flag.
absolutely. I learned that I went into it initially just like, I need help. This person's an authority figure. They're an expert. They're going to help me. I did what you did. I'm like, okay, I'm right there. You just tell me what I'm supposed to think, feel, and do. Then I realized, well, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. So then I started all over again. But then I reached out to actual therapists in our community that, I know, and I'm like, what did I do wrong? And they're like, oh no, you have to interview these people before
Yeah.
you agree to them signing signing work with them to work with them. It's you have to you are interviewing them. So, and that was a different concept for me to think about, actually asking these tough questions. And run your practice, and how do you feel about these different things?
Yeah.
So it
And you
does
have every
take
right to
work.
ask that.
Yeah. And if something feels wrong, make a change.
Yeah.
So it's not.
I think we should come up with a brochure or a pamphlet before therapy begins. And so kind of like tick them off, the biggest
Mhm.
red flags ever. No dual relationships, right? No next door neighbors as your therapist. That is a red flag.
Yes,
But
exactly.
I didn't know that. But if someone had handed me a brochure that said, check these things out before you hire someone, I think that would have been helpful.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to put Leslie McKinnon on that right away. She
Yeah,
was working on some
definitely.
other stuff. We'll just throw that on her to-do
Yeah.
list. And I know that I've heard you speak about this, write about it as well. Parts work. and caring for your inner child. What practices helped you integrate fragmented pieces of your identity?
Mm. Yes, and that all began pretty much when I found these two really ethical, top-notch therapists. One is EMDR certified, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And the other person is cognitive therapy, which is good for me because I was never allowed to talk in my childhood home. If I did, I was told I was ridiculous. So for me to have a voice and just be able to just talk to them, anything I feel or think, and not be judged by it, has been really important to me. But what EMDR did for me and how it helped me write my books, honestly, it put me in a meditative state where, you have the handheld pulsars, and it helped me visualize what the gathering place would look like. Then I saw a picture, a photograph that's actually the cover of the book. And I thought that represents exactly where I want my younger parts to come visit me and have meaningful conversations. So EMDR helped me be in a meditative state to find that, opened up my creativity. And then the parts work helped me come up with the idea of offering comfort and repair to those younger parts that may never have been able to voice anything. And they're still holding on to that, right? They still think that that's trauma is still happening. So what I do at the gathering place and in choosing to breathe, I welcome them, all of them, not maladaptive behaviors. I don't welcome that, but the parts of me I do, and I update them of, hey, I know you don't know this, but we made it. And there's a better part to this story. And what would you rather be doing now? Rather than being a parentified child, what would you rather be doing? And that's why the swing on the front of the book is so important, because it is the magical portal that helps these younger parts be able to find language and feel safe enough to tell their story. So that was all from therapy that helped me visualize that.
I remember, reading The Gathering Place and having the book, and I was like, this, she's like picked the perfect setting for this, for your gathering place, and having everybody come to the swing. I mean, that was just, it really, it was an easy way to identify all the different parts and have them come together. I thought that was a great visual that you had there. I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Um, so, you talked about your advocacy work. So currently, what does your advocacy work look like for the adoption community and for mental health reform?
I'm on a quest to go to as many conferences, retreats, um, podcasts, happy hours as possible. And because I learned so much from hearing other people speak or reading their books. I think Anne Efron's was one of the first books that I read. Actually, Primal One was the first thing. And it gave me permission to explore my own feelings and that, hey, maybe I'm not so off balance after all, because these people are talking about things that I felt and that I felt were true. So, what if I've been telling myself a false narrative all this time of low self-esteem, you're not worth anything, you're a burden? Um, and what if I just explored that that's not true? What would that change for me? And it really did. It was a game changer to be able to release all that and move into almost like I got on the swing and I went through the portal to visualize and have a different perspective about life. I'm not sure I'm answering the question. I've kind of forgotten where I was.
Oh, well, it was just about your advocacy work. I mean, what are
Yeah.
you doing now, to help?
Mhm.
And I think, a lot of organizations, we do have, carefully curated lists. NAAP has one on our website, but Sandy just happened to post in the chat to make sure everybody sees it. She said there is a guide out there somewhere of questions to ask in interviewing a therapist. It might be on the Grow Beyond Words
It
website.
is.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So there are places out there, and you know, listen, there's plenty of organizations that have great programs. Go to those other programs, come to our programs, go to in-person events and actually meet therapists, and you will learn
Yeah,
so much by just meeting the therapists that actually show up at our events. Um, you
right.
know, they're the ones that are understanding, and most of them are a member of our community, but there are other ones that are not, but they show up. I remember the very first conference we had back when we had just become Indiana Adoptee Network after we passed our legislation. So 2017, we put together a conference, and it was the funniest thing ever. We had all these people from adoption agencies show up. They thought we were a pro adoption conference. We
Right.
had people taking their programs and throwing them in the trash because Leslie McKinnon was our opening keynote, and she was like on blast. And
Yeah.
but we did have two that left in a huff, but did follow back up with us and then totally changed their life. I mean, one of them was a co-owner of an adoption agency. Now she is a therapist and owns a big practice. And she's totally changed, but she comes to all of our stuff, and she's learned. And so there's a lot of ways to have advocacy and learn all these different things. Like I said, showing up at events in person is the best, but it's not always practical. But you will definitely meet people that they might even know somebody. you know it's
Right.
who does
I mean,
who does
that's
somebody
what, and
know.
the collaborations that happen from these conferences
Oh
and the
yeah.
friendships that get formed,
Yeah.
it's changed my life. I mean, writing the books plus going into adoptee spaces, going to Cub changed my life.
Oh yeah.
I had a
Wonderful.
preconceived idea about who my birth mother was. And when I went to that conference, not this past one, but the year before,
Mhm.
I have a whole different perspective, and for the best, for the better. And then another part of my advocacy work is that I'm trying to, well, I am part of a possible documentary where we're playing off the idea of hashtag me too, but it's hashtag therapy too. And it's getting the word out there. This is what it looks like, what unethical therapy looks like. And you may be in danger if this has happened to you too. So again, it's just education, awareness, planting seeds, and giving people permission to ask more questions, to ask, it's just secrets can exist in the dark. Or, I mean, they do exist, but when you turn on
Right.
the light, they can't exist and they only make us sick. So that's
Yeah,
that's what I'm doing.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is, these relationships, whether it's the people you meet in a Zoom room or whatever, you know, great relationships have been formed, and it's always good when you have these, and because sometimes the people in our real life have no idea. This is not their lived experience. To be
Yeah.
able to message a friend and say, you know, I was told this, or therapist wants me to do, how does that sound to you? It feels wrong to me. Just to have that sounding board for somebody who has the same type of lived experience, I think is critical to making sure that if something feels wrong, you can, bounce that off of somebody else. So
Yeah.
let's see, we've got about 15 minutes here, so I want to kind of go on to another question here. One has talked about this right at the beginning, but you've written a trilogy of memoirs. So, where do you see your voice and your mission going next? You talked about maybe a potential, documentary. Where else what is your kind of future Emma/Linda go?
Yeah. Well, I would say just continuing to pay it forward. I would also say if you know anything about the 12-step program, I'm living in step 12 now. And what that means is that it's an evolution and progression of where you now, and I'm not saying I'm wise, I'm just saying that I've accumulated a lot of research and knowledge, and I do feel I'm on the road to integration. And so now I can give freely what was so freely given to me. And I want that more than anything. I want to help foundations, nonprofits when I can. I want to give financially. Um, and it's kind of ironic because I was not a celebrated adoptee by my adoptive parents, but I was left a little bit of money, and now I get to give to my community where they never gave. And it's just kind of like, a full circle here. I love this.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And then because writing is always such a hot topic, we have two variations of writing programs in our monthly programs. So we have First Families hosted by Amy Seek. It's a writing program, and then we have Migrating Towards Wholeness with Dr. Liz. But that's more of a poetry, but it's very, top of mind. What word comes to your mind? And then they do a dive into why do you think that? And let's expand on that more. Writing is hot. So you've done three. What advice do you have to the people who are like, I want to write. I'm waiting for the people that I want to write about to no longer be here, or I don't know how to start, or they want to do a different variation. They want to write. I know somebody who wants to write a play. I know people that are wanting to write music. So, kind of, as somebody who's been successful now 3 times, what is your best advice, and how do they get started?
Mm. A million ideas are in my head right now. I would start with if you are led by hypervigilance, which a lot of adoptees are because our nervous system was developed, blown up, right? And once you get that, you start disconnecting that and not letting it rule your life, then your creativity and curiosity comes back online. And then I would say, just start free float, just free writing of any thought you have. It doesn't even have to make sense. It's just a way to get your hand with a pen or a pencil and write it on your paper. And I guarantee you, if you look at it and you read it later, something's going to pop out at you and it's going to start making sense. And another thing is to write a timeline of your life. Start connecting the dots. Start realizing here's a pattern, here's a sequence. And it just gives you that reflectiveness of seeing where you were to where you can know where you're going. I would start out slow, give yourself grace. And whether you write your story for publication or if you put it in a drawer, it's still important because your story matters. All of our stories matter, and no one can tell your story the way you can. I hear a lot of adoptees say, oh, well, it's already been told, or there's too many out there. And I said that same thing to Anne Heffron. And she said, but no one can tell it the way you can. And I really took that to heart. And I did read a lot of other people's books, which inspired me, gave me permission. So I would just encourage people to get with their community and be in adoptee spaces or even the constellation spaces, because I think it all feeds in with everything. And I think you will get inspired because your creativity will be back online and just see how it makes you feel.
Absolutely. And it is, it's like for me, people are like, yours is really unusual. You ought to write a story about it. But then I feel like, so this is, I'm an adoptee, but I'm a birth mom too. So I had my son when I was 16. And, I was, gosh, in 1980, I was a girl that was sent away. Um, that still happened, so it's, I don't ever like talk about it publicly or write about it because, well, part of it, that's my mother's story to tell. And the other part of it is like, well, that's my son's story to tell. And I just got this little thing in the middle. So it's like, it's not that interesting. But I mean, and that is kind of the conflict I think a lot of us feel. It's like, well, they're still here. That might make them look bad, or it's not my story to tell. And so I think what I, got heard you say is that you got over that by becoming Emma. So that is
Right.
another tool that somebody could use if they're struggling with
It
this.
is. And I was able to be bold and say some really vulnerable things because Emma said it. Linda didn't. Of course, later when I came out, I had to face that. But at the time, I released it with, a fictional character. And it was easier. It was a lot easier. So
So
I
see,
say
that's
do
that's
whatever
another
you need
trick
to
you
do.
can use.
Yeah. And trust yourself, right? And know that your story matters. And if it doesn't, it only has to matter to you. It doesn't have to matter to anybody else. Because the way you feel about it, the relationship we have with ourselves is really where everything starts. Know thyself. And you are you regardless of whether someone accepts you or not. And that's been a really hard one for me to believe in, but I am starting to believe in that. And it's helped me a lot.
Now, I have another question because it seems to be a common theme among most, successful writers in our community. Were you a person that kept journals and you had journals of your whole life growing up and
Well, the funny thing is, not to bring back up my adoptive parents, but
well,
um, I would go to my room after whatever they had done to me, and I would listen to music and I'd listen to lyrics because I wasn't taught emotional regulation from them. I was the parentified child. I was holding all of their emotions. So I would listen to music and I would just like try to figure out what I'm feeling and I would write. And if I were in trouble with my parents, I'd write a really fantastic I'm sorry note. And I learned how to craft some words together. And even they were like, you're a pretty good writer. And then they said, and I kid you not, when I was maybe 10, you better not go writing about how we've abused you someday because you're a good writer. And, that was over my head. I was never even thinking I want to be a writer, but I'll never forget that. But to answer your question, I did start my craft early and it was all emotion based.
I think for a lot of people, that's the kind of thing they see these people that have, done really well, and they're like, "How do you remember all this stuff?" But then I had other people go, "Well, you know, I have like an inkling of what went on, and then I just kind of like made up some some details around that to kind of fill it in because I don't remember a lot of that stuff." So I think you can still stay true to your story, and you might have to do some little, creative filling in on the story. But if you were not a person that did journals or whatever, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, do you know what I found helpful is I had a big relationship with music. It really was a lifesaver. Being in the choir helped me express myself because I basically was mute at home. And when I sang, it gave me a voice. But, oh, where was I going with this? Oh, when you write your story, put on music that you were listening to at the time, and that will trigger memory after memory after memory. You will be that age. When you hear Saturday in the Park,
Oh yeah,
it just
absolutely.
evokes a feeling.
Yeah.
And it really triggers your memories of where I haven't thought about that in 30 years, but music has a way of doing that. Or looking at old photographs. Yeah. Or reading things that people have written to you or things that you've written. Those are all tools.
Yeah, so being a hoarder, I'm hearing is paying off. I have all the family's photos, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna go through those. So, I mean, we've got just a couple minutes here, but I just want to I'm going to ask you a final closing question before we do this, but I just kind of want to give you what my three takeaways are from our conversation. that identity isn't discovered once, that it is continually reclaimed. 2, therapy can heal or harm, depending on boundaries and ethics. And 3, that healing isn't a destination, it's a daily decision to breathe. So I thank you for answering my questions. I think it was very powerful. We learned a lot, and I just want to one last nugget from me before we turn it over. So if you could speak to, because this is going to go on our YouTube channel, or on our social media too. So if you could speak to an adoptee who's listening now or at a replay, who feels lost, disconnected, what would you want them to hear?
Well, since you did let me know that question, I have thought about it. And I would say find your community, find your people. We all have that. I mean, the human condition is that we have a need for a sense of belonging. But I think even more deeply felt is from an adoptee that maybe has never felt like they belong. So when you find community, and like with you people, I don't feel like I have to even over explain because you nod your heads and you know what I'm talking about. And that there's just a beautiful feeling that happens for an adoptee. Um, and so I would highly suggest that they try to enrich their life in that way. And when they do that, they're going to enrich the other people that they're affecting too. And it could be life changing.
Well, I think the real important thing for those of us that are in this Zoom meeting or regularly reading and going to conferences to remember when a new person joins our community for the first time, that they're not where we are. They might use language that we don't use, and not to belittle them or make fun of where they are in their journey, but to help them in their journey and support them and let them go at their own pace, and not be critical of other individuals who are discovering who they are. Maybe for the first time in their life that they felt permission to explore their identity. So, I appreciate you and everything you've brought to us tonight. I am going to stop the recording and we will open it up to everyone's questions here.